This video is brought to you by Skillshare. Hey number ones, welcome back to my channel. This is the Metatron speaking, and Roman helmets are fascinating, and Roman cavalry masks maybe bring the game to a whole new level. Here are some examples from the Museum of Germania Inferior of some cavalry masks that were found. And there are quite a lot of other museums that sport these outstanding masks. But what were they for? And did the Romans actually use them in battle? Okay, so of course throughout this video we're going to look at quite a few archaeological examples and findings of real masks, because those are going to help us. But masks are found everywhere, such as this one representing a Roman cavalryman. Burials are absolutely vital to understand the dress and equipment of Roman cavalry. Roman writers and Greek writers also mention the masks, so it's ubiquitous. The masks existed and they were associated to the military, specifically to cavalry. Now, I don't have a replica of a Roman cavalry mask, but I got this, and this is going to serve a purpose, because first of all, this mask has got very similar expression, a sort of emotionless expression, very similar to the sort of expressions that we see on the actual real masks. But also, we're going to try and put this one on with two helmets today. First, with a replica of a Roman Imperial Gallic Type H made of steel with brass decorations. And then we're also going to try and wear the mask together with this Montefortino replica made of bronze. Now, even though these masks are still somewhat of a mystery, the approach the historians and archaeologists had towards these masks and what they thought they would represent changed over time. So initially, they thought that these cavalry masks were, generally speaking, ceremonial. Yeah, link in the description below, I guess. And by ceremonial in this context, I mean that they thought, yeah, these probably were used just on parades. The general consensus has moved from that, so now it is strongly believed that these masks were actually used. What were they used for is going to be the subject of the rest of this video. I'm going to go deeply into this. But first I'd like to mention one thing. The reason why I personally don't think that these Roman cavalry masks were used just for parades is because you have to imagine one thing. When we think of parades, so the Roman army in all of its glory is going through the cities. Parades for the army in full battle gear were done so that people could see them. But you have to imagine that there wasn't really a dedicated parade armor and equipment set that the Romans had. They just wore what they would wear on a battlefield. The only difference would be the sort of tunics that they were wearing. Now, look at the tunic I'm wearing now. You see, I'm not wearing a red tunic, as you probably would expect. And the reason is that the sort of undyed, natural finish linen would probably be the most common tunic that a Roman soldier would wear in the camp, for example. But for parades, that would be different. For a parade, they had specifically designed tunics that were bleached pure white, because it just looked better. And we often see that these white tunics appear in iconography. For example, this piece of iconography that shows two soldiers wearing a white tunic and only one soldier wearing a red tunic. There is evidence that says that in battle, the Romans would wear red tunics to represent Mars, blood, war, perhaps even to have a psychological effect on the opponent, to see all of this strong, aggressive color. And generally speaking, that is the position of Graham Turner in the book Roman Military Dress, which is a great read. We don't know if that extends to the entirety of the Roman period, because remember, the Roman period is extremely long. We don't know if it extends to all legions. All of this to say that I don't believe that the Romans would go all the way to producing these rather complicated masks and elaborate masks just for parades. Sure, they would definitely wear them during parades, but not only. And the reason why I'm saying this is the following Greek writer. Arrian of Nicomedia, in Latin Lucius Flavius Arrianus, was a Greek historian, public servant, military commander, and philosopher of the Roman period. Now, he speaks a lot about the Romans, the Roman military, and he does mention masks. So let's read and see what he says. In his description of the elaborate exercise practiced by the Roman auxiliary cavalry, that he specifically calls Hippica Gymnasia, Arrian tells us the riders themselves, according to rank or because they distinguish themselves in horsemanship, set off with golden helmets of iron or bronze in order to attract the attention of the onlookers by this means. Unlike battle helmets, these defend not only the head and cheeks, but, conforming to the faces of the riders, have openings for the eyes which do not hinder the vision and yet offer protection. So basically, according to Arrian, who was by the way also a close friend of Hadrian, so the guy who made the wall, face masks, helmets were used in cavalry, sporting mock battles that were used to train the army in a very similar way to the very early types of jousting in the medieval period. So we can see where medieval people got that idea from. A mock battle to make sure your soldiers are ready for it. So basically we could say that these were done to maintain unit morale and fighting effectiveness. They could practice not only handling weapons, but also practicing maneuvering. Now I'd like to take a moment to mention the sponsor that made this video possible, Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community where millions of people come together helping each other with thousands of classes of all sorts of subjects, with topics such as illustration, design, photography, video, web development, animation, freelancing, and much more. So because of this huge variety, Skillshare is perfect for all sorts of people. Creative and curious people, lifelong learners, real working creatives, beginners, pros, you name it. The classes include both video lessons and a class project, and upon becoming a member, you will get unlimited access to thousands of inspiring classes, with hands-on projects and feedback from a community of millions of fellow creators who will support and encourage you and allow you to grow in a very satisfying way. There is this class I've been exploring from Christopher Rhodes called Video on a Budget. Prepare for your shoot without breaking the bank, where Chris explains how to achieve good production quality without having expensive gear. And he talks about so many different techniques and setups, and it's helping me produce better content. And since I know some of you are starting your own channels, this will be a class I'd totally advise you to check out, because it really provides applicable tips that can make your life as a creator a lot easier. Skillshare is ad-free, very affordable, because less than $10 a month for the annual subscription, and the good news is that today is the day. The first 1,000 of my subscribers to click the link in the description will get a free trial of Skillshare Premium membership. You've got nothing to lose and everything to gain, so go ahead, click the link in the description, join in, and enjoy. So, what can we actually learn from the words of Arrian, the Greek writer? Does archaeology support his claims, or is there more to it than meets the eye? So he specifically tells us 3 points of information. He tells us these masks were used during these mock battles, not during the real battles. He tells us that they were used by cavalry, and he tells us they offer good protection without hindering vision. But here's the question. If they do offer protection without hindering vision, then why not using them in the real battles at all? So he's saying that these helmets with the masks are different from the ones used in battle. But what does evidence tell us? We did find masked helmets among the debris at the battlefield of Teutoburg, and there is a tombstone in Germany that depicts an infantryman, specifically a standard bearer, wearing such helmet, so not only cavalry. Arrian tells us that they were not used in battle, and yet evidence shows that sometimes masks are found on battlefields in enemy territory. And we also have brought forth the possibility that standard bearers were using them. Well, I think we do need to look more deeply into this sort of vision situation, and I wish I had an actual replica. But this is similar. We know that generally speaking, the Greeks, they tend to leave a relatively big opening for the eye to make sure the vision wasn't compromised. But when the helmet mask is trying to recreate and follow the natural anthropomorphic look of a human face, then you're left with less space. Would that work? Okay, so generally speaking, even a smaller cut for the eyes doesn't impede vision too much, in my opinion. So I have to say I'm with Arrian with this one. Now, field of vision is crucial on the battlefield. But when we talk about field of vision, there are lots of different elements to it. Frontal vision, in this case, not impeded at all. But what about peripheral vision? A definition of peripheral vision is everything you see off to the side of your central focus while you're looking straight ahead. Essentially, it's your ability to see things without moving your eyes or turning your head. So in military term, peripheral vision is essential for assessing a scene properly. Those kind of face masks could reduce the wearer's vision 30% of its full potential laterally and 50% of its full potential vertically, although that would depend on the fit of the helmet. So in other words, what this translates to is that while I would be wearing a mask, a real Roman mask, it would be difficult for me to see my hands on the reins of my horse without moving my head. You do need to understand though that that's the same thing with late medieval helmets, well, medieval helmets in general, and yet jousters didn't have a problem. Full shock cavalry chargers didn't have a problem, and that is because at the end of the day, that's one of the reasons why, for example, medieval knights tend to move their heads in a similar way to birds, meaning that, generally speaking, when you've got full peripheral vision, you just need to move your eyes if you really need to extend it a little bit, but in the majority of cases I can see my field of vision is quite wide. But when you've got very protective helmets, then what you need to do is that you need to move your head just like birds do, and it's not a big deal. So in my opinion, it is possible. Now I can't say 100% sure, yes, they use them on the battlefield, but I think it is possible, because I think that sometimes we tend to overstate the sort of limitations that a helmet can bring onto your vision, given they are real. I'm not saying that they are not, but still thinking that a cavalryman cannot function properly with a cavalry mask, I think that's stretching it a bit too far. Also because you have to imagine the sort of psychological effect that these masks could have on the battlefield, specifically on the enemy. They are emotionless. Supernatural attire, which I've already fully described and talked about on the previous iteration, on the previous episode of this series dedicated to the masks, the demonic masks used by the samurai. And you will find a link in the description below. Well, you see, the fact that a standard bearer will be wearing one of these shouldn't really surprise us too much, because standard bearers were particularly symbolic. In fact, they were wearing, wolf pelts and all of that, so, adding also a mask shouldn't really surprise us. Now, looking at what these helmets were actually made from could be also an interesting thing to look at. These metal helmets were sometimes iron, covered with tin, and be decorated of gold. And when I say decorated, I mean embossed reliefs, engravings depicting the war god Mars and other divine and semi-divine figures, all of them associated with the military. Okay, so in conclusion, my opinion is that even though we don't know for sure, I think that cavalry masks were definitely used during training and during mock battles, and I find it possible to postulate the idea that sometimes cavalry masks will also be used by cavalry, at least some members of the unit, and perhaps even by standard bearers on the battlefield. But hopefully we will find more evidence that will help us understand with more clarity exactly how these very charming and fascinating and mysterious piece of kit was used in the classical period. Alright, noble ones, well, I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, please remember thumbs up, and if you're not yet members of this community, become a noble one. Subscribe to my channel for more content from the Metatron. Big thanks again to Skillshare for supporting and sponsoring my video, and remember to click the link in the description below to take advantage of their great offer today. And remember, the Metatron has spread his wings. Goodbye.